Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Index Podcast, where we come together every couple of weeks to discuss on-chain data, chart crimes, and metrics that move the crypto industry. With me today, I have Denning, Chief On-Chain Sleuth at Pantera Capital.
Hello, everyone.
Hildobby, Resident Data Wholesaler at Dragonfly.
Hello, everyone.
And I am Boxer, and I am the Community Powerhouse at Dune. Before we start, nothing we say here should be relied upon as legal, financial, investment, tax, or even life advice. And we are acting independently of our respective professional roles. And with that, today, the state of stablecoins. Stablecoins are a big topic, obviously. We haven't really talked about them on this podcast. Of course, they're like a topic of conversation, kind of like in everything you touch, because stablecoins are just one of the main kind of like building blocks of DeFi and crypto in general. And make the whole space a lot more kind of like, I don't know, it makes it a lot easier to hold money, I guess. But Denning has Denning has dove deep and is gonna lead us through this conversation. So Denning, take it away.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody now by this time already feel like we're really in the stablecoin cycle because like a while ago was everybody launching a DeFi project, and like last year everybody was launching a Telegram bot, and now everybody's launching a stablecoin or a stablecoin chain. So like actually like I prepared a 30-second quiz for both of you. If you can tell me all these tickers belong to what project. So USDM, MUSD, and USD0, USD1.
Whoa, that's
They're
a lot
just
of
like
them.
getting more and more confusing, you know?
I feel like USD1 is World Liberty Finance.
Yes, correct.
Okay, what were the others?
USD0 is just Circle.
USD0 is usual.
Oh.
It was lost.
I definitely wait. Tell me the rest again.
USDM and MUSD.
I know those.
Is Mega ETH launching MUSD maybe?
Oh,
Wait, you said it. Okay, which one is USDM? Which one is MUSD?
I think MUSD might be Mega ETH US dollar.
What
No?
about USDM?
I was gonna say USDM.
Okay, Dobby got it right because it's their portfolio. But MUSD, MUSD is MetaMask dollar.
Oh yeah, it just launched
Oh.
like yesterday or today.
Yeah, pretty much. I think they announced a little bit ago, but they launched it yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, it was deployed on Linea, I think. Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah, see, you know, like everything here is like getting more and more confusing. I think that's like one reason why we should talk about stablecoins. We talked about RWA, we talked with the founder Charlie, but here I think like it's one of the basic like vertical that zoomed in that are most popular right now in this cycle. And also there was so much drama on Twitter, right? Like there were so much big news in the past few weeks there where Circle is launching a chain called Arc. Hella confusing with the browser as well. I'm using Arc actually. Stripe launched a chain called Tempo with Matt Huang from Paradigm and many other like known names in this. I actually really like this title from David Hoffman from Bankless. Like he's saying like EVM is now Wall Street's new Microsoft Excel. So pretty much like, yeah, I think we are touching something in like TradFi word where like we're kind of rewiring the design of money now, like with all these adoption as well. The biggest drama was definitely about like bidding for the ticker for Hyperliquid's stablecoin. And also, of course, Mega ETH right the week before announced that they're launching a stablecoin. I think there was some like confusion as well, where you know Cap Labs was once known as like the official stablecoin that was about to launch on Mega ETH. But now Mega ETH itself has a stablecoin. I think there's a lot of like good discussion on Twitter, so I'm not gonna elaborate here. But I think what they said was like Cap now will become more like a yield distribution layer on top of Mega ETH, blah blah. But yeah, a lot of interesting discussion happening there. Dobby, what's up with the latest on Hyperliquid? Are you monitoring the situation?
Yes, so for Hyperliquid, they've had a relationship with Circle for a while, which has been the stablecoin of choice, and all users that do bridge to Hypercore and use Hyperliquid do that using USDC from Arbitrum. And it's not actually any official deployment on Hypercore, but it is a bridge version from Arbitrum. There's now, I think, over 5 billion USDC on Hypercore, and Hyperliquid has proposed to auction off the USDH ticker, which is highly sought after, given that it's USD and Hyperliquid, I guess, in a special auction, because you're able to auction a lot of tickers. I think any tickers are auctionable on Hyperliquid, but this one had a special treatment where any stablecoin issuer could submit a proposal to be chosen as the issuer of choice. And validators could vote on which is their favorite. The first we had was Native Market. This is a team that has been building on Hyperliquid since the beginning, and is highly aligned, let's call it, with the project. And then we had others come in. Paxos was another, I think, fairly notable one. Mainly, they had multiple proposals over the week as time progressed, and the latest one had them include a partnership with Venmo and PayPal, which would list USDH officially on each of those. We also had Ethena, we also had Agora, which are both Dragonfly portcos, by the way, should I mention. Ethena withdrew its proposal last minute so that validators could vote on the rest without having those votes go to Ethena. And at the end of the day, Native Market came on top with the majority of the votes and will therefore be chosen as the issuer behind USDH. Now, I think it's worth clarifying that this made a lot of noise in general on Twitter, and it was a very interesting piece of testing how governance works. And from what I understood on the actual auction, they're auctioning off just a ticker. Now, this does mean that, of course, it is probably, it's high in the category of tickers that people will consider using in terms of stablecoins, but I don't think there's any favorite treatment for it. And I think other issuers are able to keep on deploying their stablecoin with other tickers. I do believe that Ethena is still planning to do that. I'm not sure about the rest. But yeah, and I also saw that Circle, which is, I'd say, a fairly slow mover in terms of stablecoin business. As a side note, I know that ZachXBT regularly complains because they're super slow to block wallets with reported crime or whatever you want to call it. And they just deployed their bridge natively on Hyper EVM, but not yet Hypercore, which is coming soon. So yeah, they're trying to rekindle their love with the Hyperliquid team, I guess. But since the other issuers are proposing to give the majority of the yield back to Hyperliquid, it is a much more favorable treatment than Circle, which I believe isn't giving any of that yield to the Hyperliquid buybacks or token or whatever. So yeah, interesting conversation. What do you guys think on all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the last points you just touched upon kind of explains why everybody's trying to launch a stablecoin, or like explains why all these people are trying to bid the right of issuing over from Circle. Because I think like actually touch on, like, if you think about, there's $5 billion USDC being used in circulation on Hyperliquid, and how stablecoin issuer works is that whatever the amount of stablecoin issued, that is the deposit from user, right? And they hold the exact same balance in bank. And imagine like the 5% interest rate right now in US, $5 billion on Hyperliquid means $250 million. That's like a $1 billion company right there. And it's just like a really small portion of the USDC compared to the total supply for Circle. And now it used to be Circle earning all these money in their hand. But now Hyperliquid being like, hey, we are a front end with distribution. Who wants to become the issuer here and like, just tell us and be a beauty contest. And as you said, all these bidders are proposing to basically give back even 95% of the yield that they're earning going to be from like interest rates to Hyperliquid, which means these front end are trying to basically, kind of like capturing the value that they're generating from the front end. That's how the dynamics I'm seeing right here.
Yeah, I think that was, if you look at all the proposals, it was basically the first thing, like kind of like almost a requirement, because the others were doing it, to give back. I do believe 95% has been what most have chosen, but 95% of the yield to buying back Hype. I can't remember exactly, but essentially the yield's going back to Hyperliquid users.
Actually, we can quickly pull up these numbers. USDC.cool is a website that just tracks the supply across USDC, across all different chains. And in total, there is $73 billion of USDC that are in circulation, and Hyperliquid has 6 million of them. And then on top of that is like, just to kind of paint the picture, it's like Solana has like 8.5, and Ethereum has 47. Yeah, 47. And then the rest is just split up between, I think, mostly kind of like Optimism Layer 2s. There's still a lot of money. There's still 250 million in DYDX, which is interesting. But anyways, that's not the point. But essentially, this is 10% of the business of 10%. Let's call it 8% or something of the business of USDC potentially going away if USDC, or like if USDC is no longer the kind of like dominant stablecoin on Hyperliquid. So like the Circle team kind of sleeping on this is actually, it's pretty bad. There's 250 million of revenue that's just gone. If this actually plays out in the way that kind of like what was it, Native Markets? Is that the name of the issue that now won? Or like the project that now won?
Yeah.
Do you actually have any context on like what they've done before?
It's a recently formed team that has been heads down building on Hyperliquid for a while, and they've been planning to launch a stablecoin for a while. Therefore, when the proposal or like the auction came around, they were ready to have a full first draft, which was actually not great. You could tell it was written pretty quickly, but then they refined it and made a better proposal. And given that I do believe the alignment played a big role, if you look at all the conversation, and it was, despite Paxos having stuff like Venmo and PayPal as partners on this, Native Markets won the bet. So yeah, it's an interesting piece of conversation around governance and how alignment plays a role. And it's just hard to quantify, how aligned the team is. In this case, it was easier because you could tell, obviously, they've been here around for a while, whereas some of the other issuers are just, coming on and for the first time and trying to win the auction.
All I gathered was that the team was set up with like Max was the active community member from Hyperliquid, I think. And then there's MC, who was the COO of Uniswap, which I heard has a lot of like TradFi experience and connections. And there's Anish, who I think was a cracked engineer that was in the Paradigm Fellowship, under 21-year-old. And like he was, I think, co-founder of Ritual Network as well, like the crypto AI project. But then I saw his Twitter feed said like he wrapped up like around June. And so he probably started then, was native by then. It's a stacked team, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds like a stacked team. I think how this sounds like to me is that like Hyperliquid chose a partner that they have control over instead of like being exposed to kind of like working with a Paxos or working with a Circle or whoever else kind of like submitted their proposals, as they're like big, like heavy institutions, move slowly, like a lot of regulation, a lot of red tape. And they're just like, no, look, we have degened everything. We've not worked with VCs. We've not worked with anyone. We're just like, some might say that most of Hyperliquid's business model is just regulatory arbitrage. So like, we're just going to continue in this path of like, we're just going to be trailblazers. We're just going to maybe like bend some rules and whatever. Because like if they had worked with Paxos, and like, of course, like you can't say like Hyperliquid the organization, but like the validator set or like the governance chose this way, and it's like this very much signals to me that like, oh no, like we don't want to be contained by this. So like that actually kind of might be a good thing for stablecoins, or like it at least excites me, where it's like, sure, we need to do like follow the rules and like have regulation and like crime is bad and all of that thing, but like I think just yesterday we had the Bank of England proposing something like, oh, like private citizens should only be able to hold like 10,000 pounds, 10,000 pounds worth of stablecoins at any given moment, which is like, who are you to decide, Bank of England, what I do with my private money? But I think like that's kind of a rabbit hole to go down. But it's like, Probably like good to have a kind of like relatively decentralized stablecoin, or like a stablecoin that's it's kind of like hosted by Hyperliquid, which is an organization that at least seems to, I mean, they're not really decentralized, but they're doing very decentralized. They kind of act like if they were decentralized, which is interesting. Like, we'll see if anyone ever ends up in jail for all of this, but as of now, it doesn't seem like it. But yeah,
The other argument that I've seen like against native market, which is also interesting, is that some of the other teams they have a track record of actually managing billions in stablecoin that have been issued on chain, whereas native markets hasn't. Now, obviously, they have a crack team, so people are confident in their ability. But it is when you want to have a new stablecoin pop up, I think it's also nice to have the guarantee of like, oh wait, they've actually done this before and it's worked pretty well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess people didn't care that much about the track record, which was interesting alignment over having issued stablecoins in the past.
Yeah, now actually, like, since we already touched upon like a breakdown of how this whole dynamics, like who makes money and who is like doing the service for who, I feel like we can jump ahead to something related here. Is I like studied about all kinds of new design of all these stable coins. Like MetaMask was one of the example, and they have like a modular stack kind of design. But basically, all these things you can think it in like a supply chain mindset, where you would basically have a front end that has a lot of traffic, where users are depositing money into the protocol. They're trying to use something that in need of like stablecoin, and then there's an asset issuer who is issuing the money, and they probably has a right to basically do whatever with the money. In the past, mostly is just the most conservative way, putting money in bank, have an interest rate. But now there's people like designing all these things that's like using T-bill, which I'm just been learning with ChatGPT, is like the US Treasury. It basically means like you held this asset in hand and then you lend the money to the US government. And so, which basically, per my check, it was slightly higher interest rate, but also risk free. It's like US government is like the most reliable person you can lend money to. Like they're gonna pay your bill. But it's basically like it's like a short-term loan or a short-term debt to the US Treasury. And from there, you then have a third party now. For example, this MetaMask example, let me pull up like a diagram that I think is pretty clear to show. So for the audio listener, this is kind of like a diagram showing me like how all these parties in this like design of the MetaMask dollar work. So on the left, you have users who is like go through a MetaMask wallet that is like depositing their all kinds of assets into to basically swap out or mint MUSD. And there's a liquidity network, which is like the AMM or whatever platform you can swap that MUSD out with other asset. And then behind that, there's Bridge, which is, like the company that got acquired by Stripe again. They are issuing this asset and they are placing those money into the bond market, like to the US treasuries. Basically, they're getting interest rate from there. But what I digged into as the details is that they don't own all the yields. And here there's a third party called M0 protocol. They call themselves as like the platform for any front end or app specific stablecoin issuer. So basically they sit as like a third party that's like kind of neutral and checking if you have proof of reserve, which probably, as I understand, they have a framework working with all these custodian banks, basically checking, okay, Bridge, you do hold the money in this bank, and like I verify that. It's not like FTX is using money for trading, etc. And at the same time, they determine how much yields when it comes back from the U.S. Treasury or T-bill will be distributed to either the front end or Bridge, the issuer, or any other party. So like this is really like breaking down how monetary system works and like how different entities now can be, how to say, like anyone in crypto now can be a party that is doing this job. And like of course I want to say like thanks to the Genius Act, which was like the stablecoin bill that got passed this year, and so that all these design can be made possible legally, right? Like, but this is amazing. This is like how crypto people are now finally like challenging the financial markets and the system. Like we are building the future of finance now that is like re-imaging the concept of money, with all these like innovative components. But yeah, that was just like a jump ahead of like one thing I want to like break down to compare. But I know there's so many data now out there, and that's one of the goal of this podcast, so we can provide some other perspective. So let's go back to the data topics, and I want to like give it to Boxer. You said there were some interesting data you want to highlight. Show us your screen, please.
Before we do that, Hyperliquid's winning proposal bidder native markets apparently is in some way, shape, or form partnered with Stripe, as they have all the connections to. I mean, the COO apparently has worked with BlackRock before, and so on and so on. So it's not quite as community native as it seems from the get-go. Of course, I think it's a difference being partnered with Stripe and BlackRock and like being completely kind of beholden to them. But that just like as a little addition to the sections before. But yeah, I think like my most interesting, and like I stumbled upon this during my research for REV, which is like a real economic value. I've just been drawing from this topic for a while now. And it is a chart from Blockworks Research. So let me pull this up real quick. Share. Hello? Share button is broken. Oh, there we go. Solana DEX activity. Share this. So this is a chart that shows I guess we can break this down to monthly, and then we can actually just look at the last year or so. So this is the monthly trading volume of Solana exchanges, or Solana decentralized exchanges, and then categorized by whatever the trading pairs are. So like Blockworks has done a categorization of, I think the most prominent are basically Sol stablecoin, memes, and then project token stablecoin swaps, Bitcoin compositive asset, LSD swaps, and so on and so on. But for anyone who's not actually seeing this chart but just listening, in the last kind of couple months, so in August we had 68. Is that billion or trillion? Billion. Yeah, 68 billion dollars in stablecoin decentralized exchange, or like in Sol stablecoin transfer DEX volume. We have seen 68 billion, and then in kind of relation to that, we've only seen 30 billion in meme coin trading volume. So like if we just look at Solana, and like most of the Solana blockchains, essentially people are swapping Sol for stablecoins, or they're swapping memes for Sol. So like I think there's like a very interesting thing happening here, where like traders actually seem to be using Sol stablecoin as like people trade memes. They trade meme Sol, and then they trade Sol memes. Then they trade Sol stablecoins. So like people are not holding their wealth, or like my interpretation of this is that people are not holding their wealth in Sol necessarily, but rather they're swapping from meme coins into USDC, and then from USDC back to meme coins. And this is basically like, this is just like routing, like aggregator routings via the Sol stablecoin. But like without, or like I think that's like a super interesting phenomena, where like in previous cycles, and especially on ETH, we always like have the narrative like ETH is money, and like blah blah blah, and like people hold their net worth in ETH. In Solana, that doesn't seem to be the case, and like how I can basically prove this thesis is that like as the meme coin volume grows, the stablecoin volume grows, and they kind of like seem to be related. So if the meme coin volume drops, the stablecoin volume drops, and if the meme coin volume rises, the stablecoin volume rises. So like these seem to be very correlated. So like that indicates to me that people are actually using, like even traders, meme coin retail traders are using USDC to store their wealth. Or like not to store their wealth, but basically like to utilize it as a trading asset, or like a trading instrument or something like this, which makes sense, right? Like you want to trade against a stable basis and not always be exposed to like the underlying risk of like holding Sol or ETH or whatever.
I can confirm that as a retired meme coin trader on Solana, before I joined the VC, my hands were more free, and then that was exactly what I was. That was exactly what I was doing. I was basically holding everything in USDC just because Solana is too volatile, kind of, and I feel like I'm not a hater, but like this might hurts the Solana people a little bit, which is like I would hold stuff if I'm trading on Ethereum in ETH because long-term asset, I've been working in Ethereum ecosystem for forever. But in Solana, it just feels like, yeah, I'm gonna just better put money in stablecoin to be safe. And that's how I feel like maybe a lot of this meme coin traders are doing, right?
I mean, I don't agree with that notion, but I can like it seems very self-evident based on the data that like people are doing this. But
Yeah.
Dobby, what's your kind of like what's a chart that you like about stablecoins?
I looked at another angle because I'm biased, and Dragonfly took part in a research piece alongside Artemis and Castle Ventures, where the focus was not necessarily on stablecoin as a whole, but payments specifically. Let me share my screen once. Okay, so here's a chart. I'll talk about it later. First, I'll just introduce understanding the study and what it's actually focusing on. In order to put this data together, 20 stablecoin payment companies were reached out to, and data was compiled from there. And then 11 more had their data estimated using on-chain data. Therefore, it is a rough. It's not just on-chain data like you guys were watching before. And of course, there might be some imperfection in the data, but I think it's probably the best we'll get. Most are settling on chain except Binance Pay, which does settle on their own off-chain ledger in some cases. And to put this in perspective, Artemis estimates that there's 26 trillion of stablecoins settled on chain per year. This is like payments themselves represent 72.3 billion, or at least that's what they categorized, and that's just about 1% of the total. So it is a small subsection that has been growing over time, and I think is an interesting subsection, and where I want to see this grow over the long term. Because this is where your normie friends start using stablecoin, as well as businesses benefiting from quicker settlement times and lower fees that they offer across various chains. So here we can see on this chart breakdown of those payments. The peer-to-peer one is the only one that has been fairly stable and not really growing. B2B has been growing, cards as well. I'm not sure if you've seen those pop up more. There's a bunch issuing those. I'm thinking of like EtherFi, Pay, Gnosis. Anyways, there's a couple. I think MetaMask as well. Yeah.
Moonwell is another one in US.
Yes. You also have even Binance and Coinbase, but I think those are Amex card, rather unlike the rest. Anyways, you got a bunch. It's a growing category, which I think is worth keeping an eye on, and we could even have a whole episode on just those. And then there's pre-funding and business to customer, which are also growing, but a smaller margin of the market. But yeah, I thought it's an interesting category to look at and keep on monitoring. I'll be watching this closely. I'm a card user, but I want to see those be more mainstream options in terms of payments over fiat on the long term. And I have actually more charts on the dominance of USDT and USDC per country. Now, in terms of chains, first of all, Tron is going to be where most happen, trailed by Ethereum, where in some countries Ethereum is used more, but in the vast majority, you can zoom in those charts. So this is Latin America, Africa. You can see the red is prominently shown. And yeah, there's just a rare few exceptions where Ethereum represents more than 50%. But yeah, Tron stays on top. And in terms of USDT, USDC, which I found interesting because I feel like as a European, I'm more exposed to USDC. I don't know if that's the case for you guys, but it's definitely not the dominant choice, even in France, where I'm from, or US, and in basically anywhere. Yeah, so I don't know. I thought that was interesting. If you look, there's not a single country. Argentina is the closest with almost 50% USDC, but otherwise it's like Mexico also has 37%. But yeah, mostly it's just USDT.
What about US? Is it anywhere in this chart?
Of course, US is right here, 24% USDC.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised by that data. But of course, again, it is a fraction of stablecoin usage. Like the major, like a big portion is going to be DeFi overall, just like transfers, whether that's trading on dexes, lending, and all the other stuff. You also have stuff like MEV and anyways, you have a lot of other more mainstream usage of stablecoins. This is more of an emerging category that I do believe will probably end up being one of the biggest in the long run.
Yeah, this can very like the total volumes here, the absolute volumes are so low that like any like successful product taking off that like makes stablecoin payments easier or something like this like completely throws off all of these charts. And it's like, I don't know, somebody launches a good stablecoin payment app in the US, it just like gets some traction, and it's like suddenly 100 or like 98% of stablecoin payments are done using USDC or something like this. I think that like you have to caveat with it with this. Like I think the total payment stablecoin volume that you showed in the last was like 6 billion. Yeah, and then if we just take that in comparison with like the 60 billion of Solana stablecoin, like Sol stablecoin swaps, of course that's like more high frequency and blah blah blah, and like you need to qualify that number as well. But in general, like these are like for payments in general, these are very tiny numbers. And like considering crypto scale as well, like we just saw earlier, there's like 75 billion of USDC in circulation. Of course, you can't compare all of these numbers, but just to get like some scale of like, okay, this is like how you could think about this. Is payments genuinely something that we are like excited about? Is that really the way forward for crypto?
100%, I think so. Sorry, there was like another report I'm not gonna pull up from Fireblocks, and they basically interviewed people, I believe, from like just collecting survey. Why do you use stablecoin? And a majority of the answer was like, it does seem that it's faster and actually more secure. No third party trust. So yeah, if interested,
and cheaper.
Yeah.
And unless I think one of the big unlocks for more stablecoin usage, of course, is on-chain privacy in the long run. Like if you look at the card issuers, stuff like Ethify, like all you'd need to dock someone's payment history is essentially see him pay for something, triangulate the time and the amount, and you can basically say, okay, well, this was paid for this account, and you can go through the whole history. I'm a user of a account called Pay, Payy, which has an interesting twist where it's more privacy focused because they have their own settlement layer, and therefore you can't have this level of doxing. And I, as a if I want to use a card, like to me that's like a requirement. It is nice to be even using Safe and using money straight from Safe, but I don't think that's something most people should do at all.
Yeah. One more reason here mentioned in the report is better liquidity management. I think that's interesting because like you probably can move the stable coins here and there to earn yields much easier than like moving the money in bank and waiting for a low interest rate.
Yeah, you remain in control essentially of your like full control. No one has
in general that's
higher
like
authority.
That's like the story of crypto, right? We have one global shared asset ledger for all your assets, and like you don't need to move between BNY, Melon, and whatever, like Ancients and PayPal and Stripe and like all of these different systems. It's just like it's on Ethereum, or like it's on the EVM, and like all of these EVMs are interconnected, hopefully at some point. I mean, right now through bridges, hopefully in the future through some kind of inter protocols or whatever. But still, like, it's just like money is just stored on computers instead of like databases of some banks.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
But obviously, there are challenges that are not, highlighted in all these reports because they're talking about why you use stablecoin. But obviously, anti-money laundering or like, with the privacy feature, there's probably like people who are using it for the bad cause, and how can you prevent that or track that? And another thing would be like, how can you be actually secure and like holding your private key safely or not being a target? That's all probably challenges along the way. But I'm sure there's also going to be solutions that are coming up to be more professional service for that. But I guess we don't have time, but let's close up the discussion with a question here. I have a hot take to this question. So like we talk about like why people want to use stablecoin, launch a stablecoin, but why it needs to be a chain. I'm curious your thoughts about that. Further on that point is like why some people chose to be an L1, but some people chose to be L2. Like Tempo and Circle both launched at L1, but Codex was at L2, and then like I guess like Mega ETH was at L2, but now it says launched a stable. It's not really a stablecoin chain, but like their choice between like people were like, hey, Tempo, you should have become an L2. My hot take is that the smaller teams who just come out without much like brand awareness or like distribution yet, they're seeking kind of alignment and narrative and to be relevant. And they were like, okay, we need to be L2 to look for partnership, network effect, mindshare. But if you are big enough, like Tempo was launched by Stripe and like Circle has their distribution already, you don't really give a damn about it and you want to be L1. But I'm curious your take.
Tempo had Matthew Young from Paradigm and Tempo now issue a statement on Twitter clarifying their choice. And the way I understood it is like most of it is just BD talk for chilling the stuff, and then like the main argument is going to be settlement time that currently Ethereum settles every 12 seconds, which is way too slow for fast moving quick usage and stable coins in general. And that is, to me, the main reason why they chose to be an L1. But I think that's a much longer topic, like the differences between becoming an L1 and an L2, and could probably be for another episode. So I think we could also, if anyone is interested in coming on and discussing the topic and has strong opinions on either side, probably let us know, and we probably follow up another time. I don't know. Do you have a short read on this, Boxer? Maybe.
I mean, for Stripe specifically, I just think it makes sense for them to control the entire stack. Stripe is the largest payment provider in the world. They bring their own network. They don't need to like bend to the rules of Ethereum or need a ETH alignment or whatever. As long as people like create bridges to the Tempo chain, which it's gonna be an EVM chain, Reservoir is gonna be there on day one, or like Relay. And like not that this is private information. I would just expect like anyone who's like has a business sense, runs a bridge, is like, oh, we're just gonna deploy, and it's like, why should Stripe bend to the like will of whatever Ethereum or like anything? Stripe, people already trust Stripe with their payments and with their money in like huge, like giant capacities. So it's like Stripe already has the existing trust of all of those users. So like, why should Stripe kind of say like, oh, like no, like now actually you can trust the Ethereum network instead of us? Like Stripe already is in the position that like people do trust them with their money and with their payments and with their like most private like financial information. So like now, like to go from like that state to like being like, okay, we're just gonna launch our own blockchain, and like, I don't know, the validator said it's gonna be, I don't know, 21 instances of the CEO of Stripe, like the same way that like Binance Smart Chain is like not really decentralized, and like I don't know what like consensus algorithm or like what kind of like validators are gonna run the Tempo blockchain. It's probably gonna be like some kind of collective, or like what's the like, there's like a professional word for this, but like it's gonna be like the professional friends of Stripe. I would expect like, other organizations that also have like a vested interest in this. I don't know who that's gonna be, but we'll see. And then I think like for the L2 case, I think why does it like you could make the same argument for Robinhood, but Robinhood has chosen to do the Arbitrum way. So it's like that is a bit of a head scratcher. So like all of those arguments you could kind of like invert and then like try to apply them to Robinhood of like, oh, we're like aligned with the space, and for us it's really about the distribution. But like with Robinhood, it's like they're also an asset issuer. So like for them, maybe like just having the assets kind of penetrate different layer twos and like that kind of stuff is more important, because like that's really what the Robinhood play is. Like we're gonna bring like equities on chain, and we're gonna bring like private markets, whatever, like however they call this, like the open AI equity that's like not really tradable, but they made it tradable, or like the what's the rocket company of Elon Musk called, SpaceX. Like we're gonna bring these things on chain. So like we're not really that like excited about launching our own chain. But like then I don't know, like even while launching a layer 2, it's like now that Base has kind of potentially hinted at launching a token, or however they like, it's like, is Base gonna stay L2? Like I think genuinely there's like a whole episode we can make about this, and there's like a lot of discussions to be had, and also about like the economics. Maybe we can get Lawrence back on or something. But yeah, lots of different kind of thoughts that fly around. It's like it's a really kind of involved topic, and yeah,
I think to quickly answer some of those though, like I think Base in the same statement say they were committed to staying on Ethereum. In their like we're exploring a token announcement.
They were also very committed to not launching a token. So like,
I don't know.
whatever
We'll
works for them at the moment.
And then I think for the L1 argument, my counter one is that like I don't think it ever reaches the level of decentralization that like Ethereum has, and I don't know if that's even a goal. Is it a decentralization theater kind of situation?
Yeah.
So I think that's another point to discuss.
Yeah, but it doesn't need to be decentralized. Like that's the point for Stripe, right? Like they don't need to be decentralized. People already
but then it's
Stripe
just a
with the money.
database.
But they don't care. Stripe is a database. They're just recognizing that this technology is like superior to like manage something like this.
So why would users favor them over a decentralization if they're going for using a blockchain?
People don't go like for Stripe for ideological reasons. It's just like they solve the problem of like, I want to accept payments. That's it.
Yeah, no, fair.
And then Stripe basically can just roll this out in the whole world without having to like tap into like the local whatever like banking network and all of that stuff. I think we should make a whole episode on this. I think we need to finish this out here. I think you have listened to the Index podcast. Get excited for the L2 versus L1 conversation in the next few weeks. I don't know if it's going to be our next podcast, but see you all soon. Feedback and whatever, always appreciated. Join our Telegram group below, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Crypto data wizards, come join us for the parade. From Bitcoin ETF to Solana meme coin trade, uncovering public secrets in the blockchain shade. Bad chiller, cherry picking liar. We call them out and set chart, climb on fire. Index podcast.